This land once echoed with the sound of peace, now it stands as the heart of one of the world's largest conflicts. This is the history of two nations, one Israel searching for a homeland and the other Palestine fighting for survival. Palestine and Israel, a conflict not just of border but of history, faith, and power. Today, we uncover how it all began and why it still has not ended. The conflict between Israel and Palestinian people, one of the longest running and most violent disputes in the world, its origins go back more than a century. There have been a series of wars between Israel and Arab nations, uprising called intifadas against Israel occupation and reprisal and crackdown by Israel have also taken place. The consequences of the historic disputes over issues including land, borders, and rights, are still being felt, and include the latest war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. What was Israel before 1948 and how was it created? Britain took control of the area known as Palestine in World War I, following the defeat of Ottoman Empire which had ruled that part of the Middle East. An Arab majority and a Jewish minority lived there as well as ethnic groups. Tension between the Jewish and Arab population deepened when the UK agreed in principle to the establishment of a national home in Palestine for Jewish people and a place known as the Balfour Declaration. Jewish had historical links to the land and Palestine had historical links to the land. Arab also had a claim dating back centuries and opposed the move. The British said that the rights of Palestinian Arabs already living there had to be protected. Between the 1920 and 1940, the number of Jews arriving grew, with many fleeing persecution in Europe. The murder of 6 million Jews during the Holocaust gave added urgency to demand for a safe haven. The Jewish population 6,30,000, just over 30% of the population by 1947. In 1947, against a backdrop of growing violence between Jews and Arabs against British rule, the United Nations voted for Palestine to be split into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jerusalem would become an international city. No Arab nation supported this. They argued the plan gave the Jews more of the land, even though their population was smaller. Britain abstained. It decided to withdraw and to hand the problem to the UN at the end of 14 May 1948. Jewish leaders in Palestine declared an independent state known as Israel Higher before British rule ended. Israel was recognized by the UN following year. The day after Israel declared independence, it was attacked and surrounded by the enemies of five Arab nations. The conflict came to be known in Israel as its War of Independence. By the time the fighting ended with the armistice of 1949, Israel controlled most of the territory. Agreements left Egypt occupying the Gaza Strip, Jordan occupying the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and Israel occupying West Jerusalem. About 7,50,000 Palestinians fled or were forced from their homes on land, which became Israel and ended up as refugees. The event is known in Arabic as the Nakba. In the year that followed, hundreds of thousands of Jews left. They were expelled from Muslim majority countries across the Middle East and North Africa, with many going to Israel. What was the 1967 Middle East War? What is known as the Six-Day War changed boundaries in the Middle East and had major consequences for Palestine. The war Israel fight Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. It started when Israel, fearing an attack by Egypt and Syria, launched a strike on Egypt Air Force. By the time the fighting ended, Israel had captured the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza from Egypt, most of the Golan Heights from Syria, and East Jerusalem and West Bank from Urdun. About a million Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem came under Israeli control. Israeli occupation of these areas has started until this day. Israel signed a peace treaty with Egypt in 1979 and returned the Sinai. It annexed East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, making them part of Israel, although this has not been recognized by most of the international community. What is the status of the West Bank now? The West Bank land between Israel and River Jordan is home to an estimated 3 million Palestinians, along with East Jerusalem and Gaza. It is part of what are widely known as the occupied Palestinian territories. The Palestinians have always opposed Israel's presence in these areas and want to be part of a future independent state, something backed by the vast majority of the international community. Israel still has overall control of the West Bank, but since the 1990, a Palestinian government known as the Palestinian Authority has run most of its towns and cities. There are about 160 Israeli settlements housing about 7 lakh Jews in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Palestinians want all Israeli settlements to be removed and they are considered illegal under international law. However, Israeli government supports this. It says the biggest settlements at very least are permanent and that all settlements are rooted in its historical rights. It does not recognize the rights of the Palestinians who have their own state and accuse that the West Bank is part of the Israeli homeland. The Israeli government announced plans to expand settlements after coming to power in 2022. It says the creation of a Palestinian state would be a threat to Israel's security. In July 2024, the top court of UN, the International Court of Justice, said that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territories is illegal. It said that Israel should withdraw all settlers and that it was in breach of international agreements on racism and apartheid. There has been a sharp escalation in attacks by settlers against Palestinian villages since the 7 October 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. According to a report by the UNFS for Humanitarian Affairs, there were 2,208 attacks by settlers against Palestinians, resulting in casualty or property damage between January 2024 and June 2025. What is the dispute over Jerusalem? Israel and the Palestinians both claim Jerusalem as their capital state. Israel, which already controlled West Jerusalem, occupied East Jerusalem in the 1967 war and later declared the entire city its permanent capital. It says Jerusalem cannot be divided. The Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital of a future Palestinian state. Most of the population of East Jerusalem is Palestinian, only a small minority of whom have chosen to become Israeli citizens. Palestinian Israel conflict, the most sacred site known to Muslims as Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, ya Haram al-Sharif, and to Jews at Temple Mount lies in East Jerusalem. The UN considered East Jerusalem to be Palestinian land occupied by Israel. What was happened in Gaza Strip? The Gaza Strip is a stretch of land surrounded by Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea. It is 41 km long and 10 km wide. Home to about 2.1 million people, it is one of the most densely populated places on earth. Even before the latest war between Israel and Hamas, Gaza has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world. Many people were living below the poverty line and depending on food aid to survive. Gaza boundaries were drawn up as a result of the 1948 Middle East War. When it was occupied by Egypt, Egypt was driven out of Gaza in the 1967 war, and Strip was occupied by Israel, which built settlements and placed Gaza population under military rule. In 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew its troops and settlers from Gaza, though it retained control of its sheer border, airspace, and shoreline, giving it effective control of the movement of people and goods. The UN still regards Gaza as Israel-occupied territory because of the level of control Israel has. Hamas won Palestinian election in 2006 and ejected its rivals from the territory after intense fighting the following year. Israel and Egypt imposed a blockade in response, with Israel controlling most of what was allowed into the territory. In the year that followed, Hamas and Israel fought several major conflicts, including those in 2008 to 2009, 2012, and 2014. A major conflict between the two sides in May 2021 ended in a ceasefire after 11 days. Every round of fighting has been killed people on both sides, the vast majority of them Palestinian in Gaza. On 7 October 2023, Hamas fighters launched an assault from Gaza, killing about 1,200 people in Israel and taking 251 hostages. This triggered a massive Israeli military offensive by land, sea, and air. More than 67,000 people in Gaza, mostly civilians, about half of whom were women and children, have been killed, according to the Hamas Foreign Health Ministry. In July, the UK and 27 other nations, including Australia, Canada, France, Italy, Japan, New Zealand, and Switzerland, called for an immediate end to war. They said the suffering of civilians had reached new depths. The same month, UN-backed experts warned the worst case scenario of famine is currently playing out in the Gaza Strip. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification said there was mounting evidence that widespread starvation, malnutrition, and disease were driving a rise in hunger-related deaths. UN agencies had already warned of man-made mass starvation in Gaza. They have blamed the crisis on Israel, which controls the entry of all supplies to the territory. Israel has insisted that there are no restrictions on aid deliveries and that there is no starvation. In October 2025, the Israeli government and Hamas agreed to the first phase of US President Donald Trump's peace plan, leading to a ceasefire in Gaza. Israel pulled its troops back to an agreed positions and allowed more aid to enter the Strip. Hamas returned the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages while leaving freed almost 2,000 Palestinian prisoners and detainees. Which countries recognize a Palestinian state? The state of Palestine is currently recognized by more than 150 and 193 members. Known as the State of Palestine at the UN, it has an official status of the permanent observer state, which gives it a share but not a vote. Some countries, including the US, do not recognize a Palestinian state and have said they will only do so as part of a long-term political solution to the conflict in the Middle East. However, in September 2025, the UK, France, Canada, Australia, Portugal, and several other European states all announced recognition. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he wanted to revive the hope of peace and a two-state solution. French President Emmanuel Macron said the time for peace has come and that nothing justifies the ongoing war in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the moves, saying they rewarded Hamas for the 7 October attack. Israel says it has a historical right to the West Bank and opposes an independent Palestinian state, saying it would pose an unacceptable threat. The Trump administration is against recognizing a Palestinian state, arguing would be a reward for Hamas and make it harder to end the war. What is the solution? The solution is only two states. The two-state solution is an internationally backed formula for peace between Israel and the Palestinian state. It purposes an independent Palestinian state, the West Bank and Gaza, with East Jerusalem as its capital. It would exist alongside Israel. Israel rejects a two-state. It states any final settlements must the result of negotiations with the Palestinians and statehood should not be preconditions. The Palestinian Authority backs a two-state solution, but Hamas does not because it is opposed to existence of Israel. Hamas say that it could accept an interim Palestinian state based on 1967 de facto border without officially recognizing Israel if refugees were given the right to return. Earlier efforts to settle the conflict saw Israel and Palestinian leaders sign a deal called the Oslo Peace. Palestinian leaders signed a deal called the Oslo Peace Accords in 1993. This was intended to provide a framework for peace talks. However, talks eventually collapsed with each side blaming the other. The solution is only two-state that the rights of Palestine. They killed thousands of people and women and children for hunger, starvation, malnutrition.